But you're with Just Stop Oil, aren't you, Zoe?
I'm speaking as an individual.
But are you with Just Stop Oil, Zoe?
I'm speaking as an individual.
But I'm asking you, are you a representative of Just Stop Oil?
I'm a member of lots of organisations.
And is one of them Just Stop Oil, Zoe? So are you planning more action today? Because it's difficult to get the detail on this about whether there will be more protests. I know you occupied Parliament Square yesterday. There were a few bridges that you occupied as well. Are there any more plans today?
Well, I think the actions are going to continue until the government get back to us on that demand that we've got of no new oil and gas. That's kind of where people are stood at the moment, deciding that, we're going to occupy the capital, we're going to occupy Westminster until the government do get back to us on that very, very vital demand.
And so that demand, I mean, it's pretty simple. Just stop oil. You converged on Westminster, and also you blocked Waterloo, Westminster, Lambeth and Vauxhall Bridge. You also marched around 25 points around the centre of London, brought together a few groups, some political figures, as well as Insulate Britain, as well as Extinction Rebellion. I think they were there as well as your group, Zach, Just Stop Oil. So what is it that you want? So you want your particular demand is no more new exploration of any kind of fossil fuels.
Yeah, that's completely it. And we're also, with the groups of people that were there yesterday, we're demanding that big polluters and billionaires are taxed more. We're demanding better, cheaper public transport. We're demanding that home insulation is expanded more because, the amount of cold, leaky homes we've got in this country is just horrific in terms of fuel poverty. And obviously it's impacting the cost of living in an incredible way. It's making us less energy efficient. So we came together, obviously, in London yesterday with those demands. But obviously, with Just Stop Oil, we are demanding that very simple thing of no new oil and gas investment. It's a completely outrageous policy to be having in 2022, while we've got, the world-leading scientists, world-leading academics, world-leading think tanks saying that we genuinely cannot have any more oil and gas exploration. It's someone described it as a complete death sentence for humanity. And I think that is why we saw so many people come out onto the streets of London yesterday, because the tide is starting to turn. And I think people are really starting to feel concerned about this.
The problem, though, is, and I read your website intently knowing that I was going to be talking to you today, what alternatives do you put forward? Because I couldn't see anything on your website. I noticed you, as you have just articulately spelled out, no more new fossil fuel exploration or any kind of use of that in new terms going forward. Get that. But I didn't see many alternatives put forward as to how you would keep the grid as a constant and how you would power the United Kingdom.
Well, on our website, there is a research document. It might be, I don't know where that is specifically on the website, but there is a document which kind of says what the rough plan would be to get away from oil and gas. But I think in terms of what we're demanding here is that the government, it's not going to be an overnight process. That would be madness. Is that we have to, get off fossil fuels as soon as possible, start that transition which supports workers, which supports rejuvenating infrastructure. I think we've got to start that transition fairly quickly, move towards more renewable energy, move towards the other sources that we're not using enough at the moment, because we know that renewable energy is far cheaper. We know that it's obviously not having as much of an impact on our natural world. I think if we move towards these things now and start doing it now and ramping those up and turning down oil and gas and support workers, skill workers, support the industry to make that transition. I think if we start now, we can be in a good place. But the government aren't starting that now.
But we have a net zero commitment, which many other countries don't have. We have the green levy, which everyone pays on their bills. We have been moving towards renewable energies. However, what that has done has given us a situation where we face energy insecurity because, of course, the problem with renewables is that they cannot run the grid on a constant. We simply don't have the technology at the moment, and I don't think anyone is against an investment in that technology at the moment to get those renewables in a position where we can run the grid in an efficient way from them, but the technology simply isn't there yet. So my question again is, what do we do in the meantime?
Well, I think we should be insulating houses. We should be doing all of these, so many of the tools that we have available
all
to us.
New houses that are built now are insulated. Any extensions that you have to carry out on any kind of home building regulations state that there needs to be massive levels of insulation. You go into a new build house nowadays, you'll swelter because of the amount of insulation.
But the government did scrap insulation programs that they did have. And when people last year and still to this day are asking the government to roll out a national insulation program to the housing stock, which starts with social housing, the government aren't doing that. And when we're talking about the government's view of, sorting the climate crisis out, we've got Liz Truss saying she would very much like to see 100 oil licenses passed through. I mean, that is insanity
but we
in
need
2022.
Energy, the problem is we need energy in the meantime. I mean, I don't think anyone disagrees with the idea that we need to have cleaner forms of energy. The problem is that until we have the technology in place, we will be in a vulnerable situation, and we don't have an alternative at the moment. We cannot run the grid based solely on renewables. It's not possible at the moment. The technology is not there yet.
Well, this is why, again, we're asking for a just transition, which supports all of these things, which takes all these things into account. We cannot be moving rapidly on this. Of course, we have to not take our time, but we have to really consider lots of things in this. But I think when we're asking ourselves a lot about these things, we have to realise what's at stake if we don't take action fairly quickly. We've already seen places in the world. I saw your previous guest talking about wildfires and hurricanes. We're seeing increased wildfires across the world. We're seeing, drought. We're seeing famine. We're seeing mass floods in places like Pakistan, which to place 33 million people, that's more people that are in Scotland. We're seeing so many events unfold across the world right now.
But no one, the problem is no one disagrees with you, Zach. I think you lose support when you close roads, I'll be honest, and I think you lose support. I mean, I've got so many tweets and texts from people this morning furious that we're giving you a platform because...
Well, this is the reason. Obviously, no one, the media, the government, they will not listen unless disruption is caused, and that is unfortunate. Obviously, that is really unfortunate. But when the government
people to be
leave
on board
ordinary
with you.
people, but when the government leave ordinary people with no other choice but to cause disruption, like with women's suffrage, like with civil rights, when those people were ignored for years and years and years, they decided that they'd have to take disruptive action, and that's what's happened now. The government, there's such a small window. So David King said in last year that we have 2 to 3 years to determine the future of humanity. And that is a pretty powerful statement. What do you think about that statement?
I'll return you as well, and I will return you to what many people say in response to this, in as much as what you seem to be doing, Zach, is inconveniencing day-to-day Britons who want to go about their lives, closing bridges and doing all of those sorts of things, when there are entire nations in the world, and it's an argument that's used a lot, but I think it's very valid when you have nations like China, for instance, whose carbon footprint is gazillions more than ours could ever be, and a lot of people feel like, and I'm sure you appreciate this, that you're pushing at an open door, that essentially it's much easier to inconvenience day-to-day British people, many of whom are on board with the principles of what you're asking for, than actually do the hard stuff and go and protest outside the Chinese embassy, go and protest against some of these nations that do a far worse job than we do at this.
But that's, I think, just to say that, we're not innocent in this. The UK is not innocent in this, especially when Liz Truss wants to get 100+ oil licenses going. It's complete insanity to suggest that, in any way, and I'm not saying you've suggested this, but the UK is, it's got a halo above its head in terms of what we're doing.
Well, in comparison to other countries, we do. But we do.
But why are we saying that we're going to move towards 100 new oil licenses, 100 new oil exploration? But this is a really dangerous policy.
Okay, so what would
genuinely,
Ben? So we need energy insulating housing is not going to happen fast enough for people to be able to have the energy that they require. And many people as well, when it comes to retrospectively insulating homes as well, don't have much of an appetite to do that. I certainly don't want to see my house being retrospectively insulated and having all of my internal walls, making all my rooms smaller, being insulated in the way in which they would need to be, because I have researched it and I've researched the cost of it. Even if the government subsidised me to 50% of the cost, it would still be an absolute fortune to do that. So, but let's say that we agree to do that, and down the line that's going to happen. We still need energy now. We still need sources of energy that are going to come in the next couple of years. And renewables won't give us that. So where would you suggest we get our energy from if we're not going to be using gas and oil?
We should utilise the 8 years of oil reserves that we've got. We should utilise them to start the transition process away from fossil fuels. It makes sense to do it. It's a simple policy to get started. You know, when we're looking, I think we have to look at the consequences here, Cristo. We have to look at what's coming down the line if we don't get ourselves in gear now.
I know you've made that point, but if we use those oil reserves, right, and at the end of, say, 4 or 5 years' time, renewables are still not in the position that they need to be in order to sustain consistent energy that the UK needs, then what do we do?
Well, I think at the moment, obviously, we have to get renewable production up. We have to get that. But we don't
have the technology in place. What you are suggesting is that we use up our reserves of oil on the off chance of a technology that doesn't exist yet.
Well, the government banned onshore wind, and the government are really not making this easy for anyone compared to policies of other people. The government really don't care about the situation we're in right now, and that situation is getting worse and worse. But when every day goes by, but
again, I understand what you're saying, and you've made it really, really clear how bad you feel the situation is, and I get it. But my question is, if the technology doesn't exist yet, if the battery technology is not there yet to run the grid at a constant that is required in order to power the UK, because renewables can't be stored in the way that you can get the demand for on gas and fossil fuels, so that when we switch our light on, there is power there. When we plug something in, there's power there. What are we meant to do in the meantime? Because if we use up our reserves of oil, well, in a few years' time, if that technology doesn't exist yet, we are going to be up the proverbial creek.
Well, all we're asking for, and I'll remind you again, all we're demanding here is no new oil and gas investment. That's not going to take place overnight.
But without new oil and gas investment, we're going to find ourselves in a situation, and I feel like we're going around in circles, that we're going to end up without the energy that we need to heat our homes, to use our gas boilers, and to use everything else. Shouldn't you be campaigning for things like carbon capture instead? And so therefore, rather than trying to move us to a technology that doesn't exist yet and inconveniencing everyone and closing roads and making everyone actually be less on board with your demands, why aren't you campaigning for saying, look, we are where we are, we need some of these carbon energies, we should be campaigning actually for the technology?
Why aren't the government pushing for this though? Well, at the moment,
well, you're the campaign, you're the protest group.
But at the moment, all I can see as a young person is the government standing by the billionaires, standing by the ultra rich, standing by the big polluters. You know, they've given them tax cuts. This government is morally bankrupt. And I think everyone can see that now.
It's politically political ideology that you're protesting.
Political ideology here.
Okay, well, then will you answer the question? Why
is trying to bring back fracking, for goodness sake?
Why aren't
look at what they're doing here and now?
Well, that's because of the fact that, for the reasons I've explained, we don't have energy security in this country, because renewables don't have that technology yet to get there. Why don't you, as Just Stop Oil, argue and campaign for carbon capture technology being brought in, so that therefore we can use the infrastructure that we have, so that no one needs to change their gas boiler, but we actually have technology to remove that carbon from the process, so that therefore we can still use those fossil fuels going forward?
Well, I'm sure that will be a part of a just transition away from fossil fuels. Like I've said, we're not asking for some quick, snappy transition. We're asking for a transition that supports all of these areas.
But there's nothing at all on your website about carbon capture and about the potential for that, and I'm just wondering why.
Well, I can send the research document that's on the website to your producers if you want to have a read of that, because I found
does that outline your policies on carbon capture?
As far as I know, it outlines how we're going to get through that transition and how we're going to get away from oil and gas. And I think it lays out very clearly why and how we're going to do that.
Didn't you explain that it's using up our reserves of oil?
And not just that, there'll be many other tools in this toolbox.
Like what? Okay, well, you have the forum is yours. Like what?
Well, at the moment, just to try and think back to that, there is quite a few. Obviously, like I've said, home insulation, different types of using our oil reserves. We've got so many different things we can be doing. I can't name a few off my head. It's 8:30 in the morning. There is so many different things we can be doing right now.
What did you think you were doing at 8:30 this morning? This is your chance to sell to us this amazing transition period, and you don't know it.
I think we're here to talk about what happened yesterday and what's going to carry on happening over the next few
reason
weeks,
it's happening is because you have an agenda that you want to push, and that's why it's happening. And so I would have thought that you would know what you want.
We've got an agenda here to stop the oil and gas extraction happening, which is completely destroying our chances.
Do you know what? We're going to take a break. I'll tell you what. We're going to take a break. And then if you're happy to stay for a couple of minutes after the break, I will give you the chance in the next couple of minutes to look up what is going to be in that transition, and you can come back and tell me. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, I can do.
Great. Perfect. All right. So when we come back, Zach's going to outline exactly what's going to be in that transition so that we can move from oil and fossil fuels to those renewables and what's going to happen in that process. What have you got for us, Zach?
Carbon capture. Sorry, I think carbon capture is, it's very unproven tech here. It's the amount that the government actually want it to be used for. That's unproven. That's actually not been solidified.
So you are calling for carbon capture?
No, it's unreliable, unproven tech.
Oh, all right.
We should instead be putting our money into more battery storage and inventing new renewables. That would be the really smart thing to do here on the government's part.
Right. Well, but respectfully, I told you that before the break, that we don't have the technology yet for the battery storage, and that we're not ready yet. But I thought you well, exactly. So I thought you had a plan for how we were going to get there, and you had this document that was going to tell us how to get there.
Inventing more renewables, investing in them more. More storage, more renewable storage. So this is what needs to happen.
So your plan for us to stop using oil and fossil fuels as just up oil is to move to technologies that we don't have yet?
No, I didn't say that at all.
You just said that they're not invented
renewables.
Yet. Well, if you have to invent something...
Capture, this is like, I don't know why we keep going on about this. Why aren't we talking about... We should really be talking about right now, instead of talking about the solutions, which are very clearly there, which the government refuse to put their hands into.
Tell us what they are then.
We should be... But why don't you speak to a scientist, Cristo? Why don't you speak to someone who's in the industry? I'm not a scientist. I'm not an academic.
I know that. I'm not expecting you to go into the full technological details, but you are the spokesperson for Just Stop Oil, which is protesting in order to move us away from fossil fuels. So it's perfectly reasonable, Zach, for me to say to you, fine, you want us to move away from fossil fuels. What is the alternative that you put forward? And your answer is something that's not been invented yet.
Cristo, why don't we talk about why we should be moving away from fossil fuels?
Because you've made that point 3 times.
The what and not the why. Why
you've made that point many times that the world is going to end. It's a terrible thing.
No, I didn't say the world is going to end at all.
Well, you said you spoke about the terrible adverse weather that we've had and the problems that will happen as a result of us becoming too carbon reliant. And I said, great, fine, understand that, terrible thing. Most people are on board with you on that. Tell me what you would do in order to, which is your big plan, get us away from fossil fuels to transition to a situation where we are less carbon reliant. And your answer is respectfully, something that has to still be invented. Your answer is we need to invent more renewables. You just said that.
Invent them. We've got the technology there. We've got the different assets there that we can be using now. Wind, solar, tidal.
But with respect, if I was a listener to this interview, I would not be confident that we have to move to something that's not been invented yet in order to move away from fossil fuels. And if I was the government, I would be listening to this and saying, well, actually, this is precisely why we need to keep the fossil fuels.
With respect, Cristo, we're not the policy makers. We're demanding the policy.
You're a pressure group. That's exactly what you are.
We're not the people inside Whitehall who should be drafting up these policies, but they're instead drafting up policies to get fracking.
But
this
then what do you want?
From our government.
You're telling us what you don't
behaviour from our government.
But if you are going to be arguing for what you don't want, what you should also be arguing for is what you want. What do you want instead?
What we don't want is any new oil and gas. And I've told you why.
What do you want instead? What do you want instead?
We want more. We want increased renewable production. I've said we want billionaires to be taxed so that they can that money can contribute towards investing and inventing new renewables. These are no-brainer steps. And instead,
we are not inaccurate in saying then that what you are asking for is something, and it's fine for this to be your answer, but you're asking for something that doesn't exist yet. You're asking for something to be invented. And if I was the government, I would absolutely not be moving away from fossil fuels until that thing had been invented. And it's not been invented yet by your own admission.
But why are the government not putting their resources and time and policies into these things? Instead, they're focusing on fracking, increasing North Sea, both things that are dreadful.
You don't believe that both energy companies and the government are putting money into research on renewables and on battery storage?
Well, the government are putting £236 million a week into the fossil fuel industry, which could be going to looking into renewables.
And how much are they giving to renewables at the moment on a monthly basis?
I don't have that figure.
Well, is it not something that you should probably know, so that you can say this is not enough, and this is the money you should be going towards it?
I think we clearly know that the oil and gas industry is getting far more money. The oil and gas industry and the government are in bed with each other. The executives are chums. They are they are in bed together. These two.
Well, some people might say that's an absolutely brilliant thing, because if we were to rely on your plan, it's something that doesn't exist yet. It's something that doesn't exist yet.
The government has refused to tax the oil and gas industries on
They've just done a windfall tax.
Profits. No, it's not. It really isn't. It's a sham windfall tax. They should be properly taxing the oil and gas industry to help ordinary working Brits at home to get through this cost of living crisis. People are right now starving in their homes and freezing in their homes because they've got no money. But while oil and gas giants make billions, I think that is do you not agree that is absurd?
Well,
we're allowing oil and gas companies to make excess in billions.
But that's because we are not energy secure, and the reason that we are not energy secure is because we have not perhaps harnessed some of our own energy here in the UK enough, and that's the very thing you're arguing against.
Well, we need to get started with renewables. We need to get them going. At the end of the day, when we're talking about also murderous regimes and dictators, but people like Vladimir Putin can't control the wind or the sun or the waves. They can't do that.
No, but neither can we.
We would be a more energy-secure nation if we move towards renewables. People wouldn't be able to cut off our energy supply with the pressure of a button. That wouldn't be allowed to happen.
The problem is, and I'll keep going back, that it's not invented yet. And I agree. If you're saying, look, we need to put more towards inventing it, great, but you cannot campaign to transition to something that doesn't exist yet. That's all I'm saying. And you admit that it doesn't exist yet because it hasn't been invented yet. And so a lot of people might be listening to this saying, well, you're closing roads and inconveniencing people to campaign for something that doesn't exist yet.
We're not campaigning for that at all. We're campaigning for a stop to all new oil and gas. That is our
demand. For something that doesn't exist yet. There's no alternative yet, though. There's no alternative. So we stop the oil and gas. What do we use instead?
No, I don't know why are we obsessing over this? What
the solution that you're asking for? I don't think it's obsessing.
We're not asking for that. We are asking for a stop to oil and gas. It's the most simple, easy to understand demand that there is, and it's a no-brainer. And I don't know why, Cristo, why are you not reporting on why? Why are you reporting on the what and not the why?
Well, because you have spoken about the why, but it's a perfectly reasonable. I'll return to it. You're campaigning for a solution, and it's a solution that I've not heard much from you about, other than something that hasn't been invented yet. And I don't know why we'd move to something that hasn't been invented yet. We should wait till it's been invented. Zach, thank you. Just Stop Oil spokesperson. We'll get your reaction to that. Eileen in Birmingham. Morning, Eileen.
Yes. Yeah, good morning, Cristo. How are you?
Fine, thank you. What would you like to say?
And congratulations on your wedding and your
bless
honeymoon,
you.
darling.
Thanks so much. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Now, what would you like to say about this? I mean, am I wrong to be sceptical that if the solution doesn't exist yet, then we shouldn't move away from what does?
Well, you know, watching the young chappie there now, Zach, who's speaking to the young people that will be facing crises in the future because fossil fuels are not going to last that long, 20, 25 years maybe. But I lived in Canada for a while, Cristo, and they used hydropower, right? And this country is surrounded by water, waves, right? Hydropower has been there forever.
It has, but I think that the problem is, as I was explaining to Zach, is that all of these energies that are based on hydro or wind or solar or any of those things.
No, hydro.
Yeah, hydro. The issue is that we don't have the battery storage, for want of a better term, that can harness it and run the grid at a constant. Now, when we have that technology, great, we can move to renewables completely, but that technology hasn't been invented yet.
Dear Cristo, we have to look at Canada, really, how they produce their power. So, okay, they don't have the same amount of population that we do here in a very small country, 700 miles by 400 miles wide, you know, with a 75 million population, but they harness hydropower. And Cristo, it's as cheap as chips. I lived there. Even the bus shelters were heated. You know?
Yeah, they do, but they also use. Canada uses 15% uranium, 11% natural gas, 7% coal.
Where have you got all these figures?
I've just looked them all up. It's the provincial and territorial energy profile of Canada, and so they get over half of they're doing well, but no developed economy can run without a backup of fossil fuels because we can't harness it to run constantly, and until we can. I would wager that there will be no government that says, right, well, let's abandon fossil fuels when we haven't got the alternative fully invented yet.
Okay,
listen, no, that's all right. But Eileen, I've got to move on. But thank you, Eileen. Let's go to David in Staffordshire. Hi, David.
Hi, Cristo.
What would you like to say? Are we perhaps going down the bad road by still investing in fossil fuels, or do we still need to do that until we have an alternative completely ready to go?
One of the things that the guy you interviewed was saying was based not on fact, talking about increase in hurricanes and things like that. I've been following this for quite some time. There's a guy in the States called Dr. John Christie from the University of Alabama in Huntsville, and he's a climate scientist that looks at the data. There are a few videos of his online, and the thing is that although there is global warming and humans make a contribution, the models do not reflect that, and a lot of the media output is based on these inaccurate models, and I really urge you to watch.
No, but there will be a lot of people, and I get it. There are scientists that disagree. There are scientists that you are clearly briefed on and well researched on that disagree. But there are many as well that disagree with that view and say, look, humans have been a massive part of climate change and putting carbon into the atmosphere, and that is a bad thing. My point is that I think it's great to, and loads of people are on board with us wanting to be cleaner. If humans even have a 5% contribution to carbon in the atmosphere, that's a bad thing. And if we can move away from that, brilliant. I mean, I'm not against that. Where I don't quite, it doesn't really quite marry up for me is moving away from the fossil fuel situation before we have the alternative ready to go. I mean, or do you think we should just take a chance and go for it, David?
Certainly not. I think it would be foolish to abandon existing technology for something that hasn't been invented yet.
All right, David, thank you. We've got to be quicker with these calls because we've got loads and loads to get through. So many of you calling in your droves about this. Zoe in London. Hi, Zoe.
Oh, hi, Cristo.
Hi. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I mean, I was really concerned about that conversation with Zach. And to be honest, I think if you'd done your research properly, you would know full well that there are a whole range of renewable and battery technologies ready right now. It's not lack of technology, it's lack of political will, and it's lack of the government doing the right thing and the media and journalists telling the truth, to be honest. So I think
there aren't the technologies. I've spoken to many energy experts, independent
Well, you
ones.
haven't spoken to the right ones, Cristo.
So who would you give me some names then? Who would you suggest?
You need to look up UK Fires. There's an organisation called UK Fires. They're based in Oxford and Cambridge universities, amongst others. They've done lots of research to show that the technology that we've got now can get us where we need to go. So please get them on the show and they'll put you right. So you need to learn from people like this and do your research. The technology exists. All that doesn't is political will. That is what we need, and it's what we've needed for decades, Cristo. You know, you rightly had a piece on earlier, didn't you, with the lady reporting from Florida and the decimation from Hurricane Ian? And you said yourself you were scared about the thought of having to evacuate. Well, that's what millions of people are having to do. 33 million people across Pakistan. You know, we need to get real about this. The tech exists. It's lack of political will. And carbon capture will not save us. So stop pushing carbon capture unicorn myths, because that's not going to save us.
Do you know that
That's the reality that we're in, Cristo. We're in a really difficult place.
Zoe, you know that UK Fires themselves think that it's going to take till 2050 in order to get to the situation of fully renewables. I'm on their website right now. And they think that they've got the lowest risk path to get there by 2050 is when they cite themselves.
I know that I'm pretty sure they believe we can get a lot further, a lot faster.
Well, their website says something different.
Well, please invite them on. I'm not an academic, but please invite them on. I'm sure they would love to speak to you firsthand. You know, I'm here as a concerned mum who's done a fair bit of research herself, and relying on carbon capture is not the answer. It's not going to get.
No, but fine. But my point was, and I also acknowledge that carbon capture is also an unproven technology. But my point was that the battery technology today in 2022 does not exist in order for us to move away from fossil fuels. And sorry, excuse me, Zoe. Let me just finish. And the organisation that you yourself cited that was apparently going to give me the alternative and give me this battery power that we need on their own website states 2050 would be when that would be implemented.
Okay, get them on, talk to them directly. What I'm saying is get a range of experts and look at the right information. But what we also need to accept is that we're in a really difficult situation here. We can't keep on business as usual, can we?
No, but it's not unreasonable.
And we have to have massive demand management.
But Zoe, it is not unreasonable to ask someone who comes on from an organisation that is protesting for us to stop the use of fossil fuel what their alternative would be and why.
And Cristo, he's a young person who's scared for his future. Can you not just understand that? And it's not unreasonable to challenge a journalist like yourself to do their research before.
Well, I have just done my research that you suggested, and the place that you suggested is 2050.
You need to do a little bit more than have a quick look at the website whilst I'm on the phone with you.
This is why do you not think I've spoken to countless energy experts that have all agreed?
No, not countless, no, because then you'd know that the renewable tech and the storage is here. And
but it's not here.
Okay, I'll give you another thing you need to research. You need to research degrowth.
What's degrowth?
Well, exactly. If you don't know what it is...
Well, I'm not an energy scientist. You seem to be annoyed, Zoe, that I'm not an energy scientist. All I can do is...
Degrowth
well,
is not
then, with respect, it's fair to say that you probably don't know what you're talking about either, then.
You don't need to insult me, Cristo.
Well, that's exactly what you just said to me.
No, degrowth is the reduction of the material and energy throughput in the economy, so that we actually size the economy to fit the planetary boundaries, because we've completely bust planetary boundaries.
So it's against capitalism, basically.
It's not ideological. It's accepting reality. It's accepting that physics, chemistry and biology exist, Cristo, and that we have to live within planetary boundaries, which is what we're failing to do. So
how long have you been with Just Stop Oil yourself, Zoe?
I'm speaking as an individual, Cristo.
But you're with Just Stop Oil, aren't you, Zoe?
I'm speaking as an individual.
But are you with Just Stop Oil, Zoe?
I'm speaking as an individual.
But I'm asking you, are you a representative of Just Stop Oil?
I'm a member of lots of organisations.
And is one of them Just Stop Oil, Zoe?
I support Just Stop Oil.
So you're a member of Just Stop Oil, the organisation that I gave a 30-minute forum to. You have just called on the pretense that you're not from there. You've told me to do more research, and the research you cited as a member of Just Stop Oil, it cited 2050. I'm not calling as a member
of anything, Cristo. I'm calling as a concern.
Are you a member of Just Stop Oil, Zoe?
I'm a supporter of Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain, Just Stop Oil. I'm also a member of the Wildlife Trust, Cristo. I didn't think that was an offence nowadays.
Well, there we go. See what happened? See what I did there, Zoe? I did my research, and that's how I managed to expose you as an activist yourself for Just Stop Oil, calling on the pretense that you weren't. Have a lovely day, Zoe. Thanks for your time.